Good morning, everyone. I'm going to continue my series on why I believe the US is going to remain the sole global superpower going forward. If not, what the new term is a hyperpower, meaning they will largely be uncontested globally in nearly every facet of economics and military, etc. Many would say that China will be contesting them. I completely disagree. I believe China is on the downturn while the United States is facing a significant upswing given the geopolitical and geoeconomic situation going forward. This one's going to focus on agriculture, and I pull a lot of my information from my past studies at Johns Hopkins, as well as when I did my MBA studies at Maryland. I focused a lot on European policy there, especially in business. But I also read a lot. So Michael Beckley, George Friedman, Peter Zion, Martin Katusa, all of those guys provide information that I tend to use in these little videos I make. So this one's going to focus on agriculture and why the U.S. is going to dominate agriculturally going forward. And this is because the U.S. is by far the world's largest agricultural producer and exporter. For America's food supply system to fall apart, it would need a whole lot of things to go wrong. And it would also need no intervention. And that's just not going to happen. The U.S. has the most stable and secure food system in the world. And because of that, the U.S. is a net exporter of like 25 different food items, and it only imports something like 10 different items that are of absolute need. The rest actually can be made in-house in the U.S. We just choose not to. These are things like oats and stuff like that. We tend to prefer to import those. Now, interestingly, the U.S. produces enough food that it could sustain a population twice the size of what it is now, so roughly 600 to 700 million people. That is without any kind of technology advances adding agricultural capacity. And the reason they can support this is because the greater Midwest is the largest chunk of arable land on the planet. And that doesn't even include the trade we have with Canada, because when you extend that upward, Canada plays a part as well. And that just grows our infrastructure agriculturally when we combine US and Canada. And for the most part, we are tied to Canada very heavily. There's very little cross-border problems when it comes to trade, and especially in food. We don't even use all of this land to its full potential. And because of this, we have such a huge capacity. But even though we don't use it to its full potential, we still have the largest chunk of used arable land in the world. So we not only have the biggest chunk, but we could actually grow that chunk of arable land if we wanted to. Now, couple that with transportation. The U.S. has the cheapest transportation costs due to rivers and intercoastal waterways. This is because moving things by water costs about $2,000 per container less than moving them by rail. That's Europe's primary mean, is by rail. Moving via water is also 15 times cheaper than moving by road. And the U.S. has 15,000 miles of shippable waterways when you count the Mississippi River system, the Columbia River system, the Hudson, and all of the ported intercoastal waterways up and down the east and west coast. 15,000 miles of the cheapest and cleanest transportation you can get integrated into one secured system under the U.S. umbrella. That doesn't count Canada. When you add Canada to that, it only gets better. You want a crazy stat? The rest of the world combined has only 15,000 miles of integrated, secured, ported, and navigable rivers for transporting. You couple that with the best highway system outside of Germany in the world and the best long-haul rail system in the world, and America can move its food at will, cheaply. That means the U.S. food is cheap, and we grow more than we need, and we can move it cheaper than anyone else in the world, period. That means we export the most. So now I spoke about the future of agriculture and technology just a bit ago. Some say that the technology will allow us to advance our growing potential to 2 to 5 times more than what we do now. So we can increase our food output by 2 to 5 times. The U.S. will be the leader in this arena, mainly because there are already 5 of the top 10 agricultural science programs in the world are in the U.S. The number, if you add in Canada, you add another one. So in North America, 6 of the top 10 agricultural programs reside there. Russia can't afford the type of tech that's going forward, the type of plant-focused care technology that will be coming down the pipeline. Russia can barely afford farm equipment. China won't be able to afford it in the future and are already way behind. But what about Europe? It has a strong agricultural base, but they have some situations. Their system relies on multiple countries cooperating, which is not always the case. And prior to World War II, rarely the case of them cooperating. That means Germany, France, Netherlands, etc. have to get along, which right now they do, but historically they didn't. Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, that's all the same system. It's the US system. And it's bigger, and it's more maneuverable, and it's integrated. Most of the stuff in Europe has to be transported by rail because their rivers aren't interconnected or can't support the kind of transport that the US can. Now, couple that with the fact that you need 6 inputs really to have a strong agricultural program. These are arable land, transport infrastructure, the labor, fertilizer and fuel, ag financing, farming equipment, and ability to secure global imports and exports. It's actually 7 items, so miscounted, but you need those 7 items. And according to most experts, there's only one country that checks all 7 boxes, and you guessed it, it's the US. Only France and Canada check all 7 in a regional sense. Now, some will ask about Russia. What about Australia? What about much of Europe? Well, the Russians are close. It depends on their future relationship with China. China is also close, but that depends on their relationship with Russia. From that list, Russia is missing labor and farm equipment. China is missing energy and fertilizer. Both have what each other needs, but both are missing financing, and that's going to be a problem going forward. Russia and China can trade on most things, but they also may go to war over them. Remember, their futures are not economically bright, so they may start to flex on each other. Sanctions may cause this situation to be more dire. Now, Western Europe, the UK, Turkey, and a smattering of Asian nations like Japan, with its influence, will still be able to eat, albeit more expensively. In Africa, Nigeria will be the only country that has enough ag inputs to not go hungry. Australia, with the help of North America, can feed itself and a good portion of the Asia Pacific. Any country I didn't mention is at risk of food insecurity, and there just won't be enough. And that includes India. The Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa will get it the worst. These countries will need to make deals with food exporters, and frankly, some won't be able to. And make no mistake, countries that have excess calories, such as the US, Russia, Canada, France, and possibly Australia, or even possibly Nigeria, will begin to use food diplomacy. And I believe Russia will be the most nefarious. They've shown that already. France will become the overwhelming dominant power in Europe over food. Nigeria will likely grow to be one, if not the dominant power in Africa because of food. The US will remain the overwhelming global power because of food. The US will use food to tighten its grip on the Western Hemisphere. And in reality, because of its ability to ship food anywhere, the entire world. So just be thankful that the US is in the dominant position, not China and Russia, because they would be worse for the world. Now, some of you may be saying, why does security and agriculture matter? Well, the US can afford, or the US afforded the world a level of global transport security that is going away. And it's not because the Americans can't, it's because the Americans are becoming disinterested. Foreign policy is never in the top 5 and even rarely in the top 10 of American issues. So we are largely taking our boats and going home. And that's because America keeps being told to focus on our own problems. Well, guess what? We are now. 10,000 years of constant wars in Europe, with the last 80 years of relative peace, was a fluke. The peace that we've seen is realistic going forward, given the history of these regions. And the European peace, even in the last 80 years, was iffy with the Yugoslav wars, Georgia, Ukraine, etc. Prior to that, Europe fought itself, Asia fought itself, hell, even North America fought itself. U.S. soft and hard power cut that shit out. But that's going away. So Russia blockading Ukraine or whomever will be a thing. China flexing on Japan and others vice versa will be a thing. Greater problems in the Middle East will be a thing. Meanwhile, under the U.S. umbrella, the Western Hemisphere will largely remain peaceful and fed. Meanwhile, in the rest of the world, nothing will cause a nation to go to war faster than not having enough food or not having enough energy to heat your meal. Neither of those will be a problem for North America. In fact, they will be revenue streams for North America and tools of geopolitics. Meanwhile, exactly no one is going to even attempt to take resources from the U.S. because you just don't do that when you're trying to take down the most powerful country in the history of the world. And that's why the U.S. will remain so strong, and agriculture will just be another pillar propping that up.